Good afternoon once again. I must tell you that Dr. Malcolm Fabiyi is speaking from Chicago, and the time now is perhaps 5:30 a.m. there, and he has had to wake up for this session that he's having with us. Thank you, Malcolm, for that. To all of you as youngsters first and for faculty, I must tell you that you are poised at a phase of time in India and the world where if you want to make a career out of water, there is a major shift and you can win from that opportunity. Whether you make careers out of it or whether you become entrepreneurs who will take this challenge for India of treating water and making, as the theme today says, used water into that new oil of opportunity for all of you. Like Dr. C.K. Prahlad from Ann Arbor said many years ago, it's very easy to see all these deficits and challenges as problems. If you can see them, all of you youngsters here, engineers, architects, MBA professionals, whoever you are, if you can see this as opportunity for you for the next 10 years, trust me on this, one of you guys will make $1 million, right? How? Don't ask me, right? You find that out, learn from how Dr. Malcolm speak on this. One small note for many of you who are newcomers, as Payal reminded me, this series, the Distinguished Lecture Series, I think is now 3 years old. It's the idea of bringing this, starting this, staging this platform was to see that we bring you many distinguished minds in India and from the world outside, right? And I was very, very fortunate that without a demur, Malcolm said yes when I wrote to him and asked him to see if he can be present here. I was very apprehensive because 3 p.m. is an unearthly hour out in his time zone. But he said yes to us. Thank you so much once again, Malcolm. And to all of you, listen to him. This is part of the larger philosophy at the Prem Jain Memorial Trust of trying to see how we can push the frontier of thinking on sustainability, especially among youngsters and teachers. And that is why it's important for us that people like Architect Rachna or Professor Shruti Jain, who is present here today, are part of that movement that Prem Jain Memorial Trust has been sort of pushing for 4 years now. Over to you all.
Yeah,
Malcolm, do you think?
and one line, Doctor. Currently, we are, and Shruti and Rachna and everybody who's in Delhi or joining from Delhi NCR will know we
I
are
know.
drowning.
Yes,
Water is a
yes, yes.
real
Uh,
threat at the
right,
moment. The last week, the city has been
right.
paralyzed because of excess
Absolutely.
water. I
That
mean,
is
if
the
water is
yes.
the new oil, we are wasting it. So
That's
we're
the
really looking
conundrum of
forward
water. You
to.
see, water is never about water. Water is about water management. Water is not for want of solutions that we are not securing things. We are blind. We are stupid. We are inconsiderate. We are everything that we should not be. I mean, as cities, as human beings, as water users, as governments and administrators, name them if you like, or whoever they are. So it's a very, very sad situation that when there is abundance of water, as you have in Delhi today, you have this deluge, and then you run into months when the newspapers will scream about it, and everyone will point a finger at the government and say the government is not doing. Did the government ask you to send your child to this college that you are going to? Did the government ask you to see how much you will earn in which company? Why do you not blame the government for not giving you jobs or not giving you education? Your parents find the money to see that you go to the right places, school to college to whatever, right? Why are you not then willing to take the step of solving your own damn problem? This is the question we all ask. That is, if you do not localize the solution, if you do not decentralize it and work towards how you produce and you consume or you prosume, you will not solve the problem of water or of energy. So, if you can stop whining, shall we say, about the challenge around you, and once this current calamity in Delhi stops in the next, say, 10 days or 12 days, work with the government, work with the community, not even with the government, the local government, with the panchayat in places where you live in such areas like Pile does. And then see that you are finding solutions exist. You have to find the right people who know how to mitigate inundation threats of this kind and to also mitigate those challenges of not having water and find, I mean, you are living in an apartment, let us say, of say 500 flats. And I can tell you that 300,000 liters per day at 600 liters per home, or therefore about 110 million liters in a year, can easily be solved without your having to get tankers from outside or some grid water from a Jal Nigam or your own borewells. Easily it can be found, but you must be willing. I'll stop there.
We have,
Absolutely. Yeah. I
I,
absolutely agree with Professor Hariharan that we all have to make a conscious effort ourselves. Definitely, that's the most important thing. So the change that we need to bring about is, first within ourselves and then with others. So the whole community, the whole,
in fact, in
environment changes.
every
So that's
series, when I
absolutely
have
key.
senior faculty members like you, I urge them to see that they first do it in their college. Walk the talk. Why are you preaching when you're not going to actually be doing it, even in your own public building? Forget about your homes. That's the next that you should do,
Yes, absolutely.
right? Suresh is here. Malcolm, for you, Suresh ji is one of the senior most members who's been pushing this green movement in India. He was the national chair for the Indian Green Building Council. He's a member of the board of governors here at the Prem Jain Trust, and he will choose to pick the right kind of sessions to be present in. He must have read a little about what we sent about you and decided that he will be here. He is a great learner. He crossed 80 last year, Malcolm, but he's a fantastic man. He travels about 10,000 kilometers a month. I don't know how he manages to do that. Just hearing of his schedules, tires me sometimes. All right, I'm 10 years younger to him. All
Wow,
right,
that's
I'll leave it
beautiful.
there. Thank you, Sureshji, for being
Thank you,
here.
Sureshji, for being
thank you, Hari.
Yeah, it's 5 minutes past the hour. I think we must leave the floor to Dr. Malcolm Fabiyi.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to you once again. You have about 35, 40 people here, and there'll be a few more to join, Malcolm. Go ahead and start off. Thank you so much. We will learn from you.
Okay, thank you so much. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay, super. So I first want to thank Dr. Hari for the introduction. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be participating in this distinguished lecture series. My name is Malcolm, and I'm actually based in Washington, D.C. So I'm on the East Coast of the U.S. And what I'll be sharing with you today is an incredible passion of mine. I've spent the last 25 years working at the intersections of water, wastewater treatment, renewable energy, sustainability, carbon management. And I think one of the most critical things that we deal with as humanity is water. 60 to 70% of our bodies is water, 70% of our planet is water. Water is one of the most abundant things available to us. But the challenge is it's also one of the most scarce things in terms of the availability of things like drinking water. And the reason is simple. The reason is it's expensive to treat. And so even though we have 70% of the planet being water, only about 1 to 2% of that, fresh water, is actually cost effective to treat. The vast majority of it, which is saline water, ocean water, brackish water, requires ridiculous amounts of energy. And as you look around the world, about 2 to 3%, in some cases up to 4% of the energy that any community uses is just used in water treatment. It's used in moving water, transporting water remarkably long distances and things like that. So what I'll be talking about today would be truly a discussion on what I believe is an exciting future that exists for how we think about water treatment, how we deal with water treatment. And I think Dr. Hari came up with a provocative topic that, perhaps water is the new oil. And I really, truly believe it is. And I'll be sharing with you over the next few slides my thoughts and ideas about that. So in terms of the structure that I'll use is, I will start by going over some fundamentals. I know that there's a variety of people in the room. I understand that there might be some students that are architectural students, some people are engineering students, some people are design students. So the first thing that I'll do is I will try to, in about maybe 2 to 3 minutes, make everybody an expert in water treatment, so that when I talk about water treatment, you have a real understanding of exactly what it is that I mean, And then we'll talk about the last 120 years of water treatment. We'll talk about the trends and drivers. I mentioned the last 120 years because that is about how long we've had the current concepts and the current philosophy of water treatment. That's when the technology that we actually use today was developed. And quite frankly, it hasn't changed much in those 100+ years. And then we'll talk about the opportunities for the future. And I'll point out a number of areas where I believe there is immense opportunity to just rethink the paradigms that we have around how we think about water and how we deal with water. And then hopefully we'll have some time for discussions. So this image captures what the modern water treatment facility is about. So you start with something called an influent, and that influent is just stuff that's coming from your homes. It is the material that goes down a sewer network. It's what goes through the pipelines. It's what's coming from toilets. It's what's coming from kitchens. It's what's coming from homes. It's what's coming from commercial buildings. And the first thing that happens with that material is it goes through something called a grit removal. Now, think about a water treatment plant as a communal stomach. All that we're doing in water treatment is we're taking the product of digestion. Humans, we eat food. About 40–50% of that food that we eat is turned into energy in our bodies. But there is a certain fraction of that food that we pass out as feces. Now, that feces is a mixture of the food we ate but did not fully digest, as well as microbes that are present in the human body. One of the fascinating things we've discovered in the last 10–15 years is that the human body has about 10 trillion cells, and 9 trillion of those cells is actually bacteria. Only about 1 trillion, roughly 10% of the total cells in our body are human. Now, where do those bacterial cells reside? They reside in the gut. And when we pass out feces, about 50% of that feces is bacterial cells. So a wastewater treatment plant is a communal stomach. All that we're doing in the wastewater treatment plant is we're making sure that the organic material that is present in waste coming from our kitchens, toilets, communal usage areas, that material is removed before we discharge it as an effluent. That effluent is going back to a river, a lake, a stream, or wherever it is that we basically take our drinking water from. So the first thing that happens is we remove something called grit. What's grit? It's stones, it's small pebbles, it's materials that are carried along typically from the collection system, from the pipes, the sewer network. Sometimes it might rain and the rain might wash sand into the sewer network. So the first thing we want to do is we want to remove those things. Because why? Because those things are not organic. They are not biodegradable. Bacteria can't feed on them. So again, remember, all we're trying to do in wastewater treatment is we want to encourage microbes to basically treat the water. And then we go into something called primary clarification, and primary clarification is where we remove organic material that can settle. Why is that important? Because we're trying to encourage microbes to consume the waste that's coming in. We need to make sure that what we're exposing to the microbes is smaller than the microbes, something called soluble. Microbes are micron sized, they're typically 1 micron and less in size. So what happens in a primary clarifier is all the solids that are bigger than that, even though they're organic, fall out. This is where we capture them in something called the primary clarifier. Then we go into something called an aeration basin. What do we do there? We just encourage microbes to grow, and we put oxygen in there, similar to the way that we breathe in oxygen when we're going through the digestive and metabolic process. And then this is where the real treatment happens. That is where the organic material is consumed by the microbes. And the carbon that is in the waste that came in is then converted. And in the next slide, I'll show you what that conversion looks like. Then we have something called a secondary clarifier. All that does is it takes this mixture of microbes and treated water and separates them into 2 layers. And at the end of the secondary clarifier, in the top, we have a very clean effluent that comes out, and we discharge that back to a river, a lake, or stream. And then we take the bottom material, which is now a lot of bacterial cells, and we combine those solids with the solids from the primary clarifier. And in the traditional way we think about wastewater treatment, this is now what we call a sludge waste. And we take that sludge waste and we take it to a landfill. But remember, that sludge waste is full of organic material, biodegradable material. It's full of food. It's full of energy. And in most wastewater treatment systems today, unfortunately, that material goes to a landfill where it becomes a problem. And so we'll talk about some of those issues. But the process, this process that I'm describing to you, was invented in 1914. And by a pair of gentlemen called Arden and Lockett. And it's based on something called the activated sludge process. And again, the heart of the process is using microbes to do the treatment. And so in terms of the microbial treatment of water, there are two major steps we can take. One is aerobic. Aerobic happens in the presence of oxygen. And basically what we do is we take a carbon-based waste, we expose it to microbes in the presence of oxygen, and we convert the waste to carbon dioxide and new cells. About 60% in the aerobic process of the organic waste that comes in is converted into carbon dioxide. And about 40% is converted into new cells. Those cells is what we have to waste. That's what goes to waste. And then we have the anaerobic process, which we carry out in the absence of oxygen. That process also requires microbes. And there we form, instead of just CO2, we're able to form methane and CO2. We convert about 80% of the organic waste .
We lost you there, Malcolm.
This biogas, that methane, and then we also generate cells, and those excess cells are waste, and we send that to a landfill. So these are the two different types of processes that take place in a typical wastewater treatment plant. And on this slide, I call this a modern wastewater treatment facility, but you would recognize the top image from the previous slide that I showed you. This is the structure that Arden and Lockett developed in 1914. And a wastewater treatment plant that you build today looks exactly like that. So in over 100 years, we have not fundamentally changed the way we think about wastewater treatment. We still think of the waste, we still call it wastewater, because we think of it as something that we need to get rid of. We think of it as a problem. We think of it as something that needs to be dealt with as a cost center. But what I want to challenge us to do is this the appropriate philosophy by which we should actually think about something that contains so much organic material locked up into it? Is this how we should think about something that is essentially a communal stomach that is taking all the food that we eat and all the energy that's locked up into it, and we're spending more energy to try to treat it, when the reality is, why do we eat food? We eat food because it gives us energy. And over 50% of the food we eat and all the energy contained in it, we send to the wastewater plant. So why do we need to put in more energy to treat a material that already has all the energy that it needs? Well, so what I want to share with you here are the trends. I'm using the US as an example. So in 1914, the activated sludge process is developed. But in the US, for instance, there was no requirement by many communities to do any type of wastewater treatment. The reason why water treatment became regulated in the US was because in the 50s and 60s, as industrialization developed, there were a series of very, very public, for want of a better word, accidents that happened. there was so much discharge of pollution from industry that rivers were literally catching on fire. This picture here is of a river in Cuyahoga in Ohio that literally caught on fire because it was receiving waste from an industrial facility. So at that point, it just became clear that, look, we need to do something about pollution. And so the EPA was established in 1970. In 1972, there was something called the Clean Water Act, and that Clean Water Act was what required that everybody needed to treat whatever water was being discharged into a body of water that was shared by the community. So that's what drove water treatment in the US. And in order to remove something called COD, so COD is just chemical oxygen demand. To remove it, all you need to do is to do exactly what Arden and Lockett developed. And then as we got to the 1990s, the concern became bigger. Water typically contains, wastewater contains organic material, but it also contains nutrients. It contains nitrogen and phosphorus. And then what we found in the 90s was that even though we removed all the organic material, all the COD, because the concern is, so remember this, if you don't remove that organic material and the water gets to a river, a lake, or a stream, what's going to happen? The organic material is going to encourage microbes to grow wherever it lands. So if it lands in a river and microbes grow in the river, what happens? The microbes are going to consume oxygen when they degrade the organic material. And when they consume that oxygen, it means they may sometimes consume all the oxygen in the river. And if they do, what you find is you begin to see fish kill. Right? It deprives all the other organisms of all the oxygen they need. And so that's primarily why you are trying to remove that organic material. But the problem is, if you still have these nutrients, there are certain microbes that don't need oxygen or don't need carbon in order for them to grow. They don't need organic carbon. And we call those microbes autotrophs. An example is algae. Algae can get the carbon they need from the air. Algae can get the carbon they need from inorganic material. And so we were removing organic carbon thinking that would solve it, but we were finding that as long as nitrogen and phosphorus were getting into the water bodies, that algae could actually grow just by capturing CO2 from the air. And so the regulations expanded to include the removal of nitrogen and phosphorus. And this was in the 90s. And so we started introducing things like membrane systems. We started introducing more complex technologies into the wastewater treatment space, requiring more energy. And at that point, we started asking ourselves the question, if we're removing all these different things and using all this energy, and we're treating all this water so that we can remove not only carbon, but nitrogen and phosphorus, shouldn't we start reusing that water? Because it's so clean. It's even cleaner than what's in the streams and lakes and rivers that we're trying to put the water into. And this is where water reuse as a philosophy actually began in the 1990s. So the paradigm began to shift. And then regulations also became more complex. Now it was not only sufficient to remove carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus. Now there were instances where you had to remove certain types of metals. Then we started thinking to ourselves, well, if we're removing all these nutrients, well, guess what? We have a phosphorus shortage in the world. A wastewater plant has a lot of phosphorus. It has a lot of nitrogen. Why? Because we eat a lot of food that has nitrogen and phosphorus. So why waste it? And so this paradigm of actually recapturing some of that material came up. And what we had was a situation where we began with just treatment of water in the 1900s. We moved to a reclamation paradigm in the 1990s, where we started to think to ourselves, let's reuse this energy that is being generated. Let's reuse this material. Let's recycle the water. And what I want to challenge us about now is a new paradigm, a biorefinery paradigm, where we don't even think about the wastewater plant. It's not even wastewater. It's a raw material that's coming in. And what can we do with that raw material? Well, so this is what we may be able to do with that raw material. So if you think about, so we can have, if you look from the top right of the image, we can have organic waste coming from households, organic waste coming from industry. The soluble part of that waste goes to our traditional water treatment process. The clean water goes to a receiving body of water, a river, a lake, or stream. The sludge is no longer a waste stream, but that sludge contains energy. That energy goes to an energy factory because it contains remarkable amounts of energy. We can generate biogas from there. And in fact, why should we even limit what's going to our wastewater plants to what we get from households and industry? We also have animals generating all this organic material. They're generating manure. The manure of a cow, material from a pig, things from a poultry. All those are rich, dense sources of carbon and energy. We can send them to the same energy factory that is situated in a wastewater treatment plant. There, we unlock the energy that's in the carbon. We generate biogas, that mixture of methane and CO2. We use the methane to generate electricity. We use it to generate heat. And perhaps we could also then we can remove the nitrogen and the phosphorus. What is fertilizer made of? Fertilizer is NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The nitrogen and the phosphorus we need is already locked up in the cells. We can unlock that, generate organic fertilizer. And then, we can generate a phosphorus-based fertilizer as well. And then we can make all types of chemical products. Why? Because we have, in many cases, waste biogas, we have waste CO2, methane. Could we actually begin doing something with that? So I will identify 6 areas of opportunity that I believe, as you guys think about careers in the future, as you think about design philosophies, as you think about areas where you can put in your passions and your efforts, these are the 6 areas that I think, just based on my experiences over the last 2+ decades, are areas where solutions are still needed. So the first one is, we need to do something called boosting lysis. What is lysis? We'll talk about it a bit more, but lysis is how we open cells up, how we rupture cells, right? If I have a bacterial cell, how do I get into the energy contained in the cell? A bacterial cell is a solid structure, but that solid structure contains about 96% liquid, and that liquid is a soluble organic material that contains energy. But how do I breach that cell? How do I rupture that cell to make that food contained in the cell available? Because that's the only way I can begin to use that material to generate energy. That is an incredibly difficult problem for us in sewage treatment and renewable energy today. The second one is the digestion process. The digestion process is that step where we don't use oxygen, we put in organic material, and we generate biogas. But that process is very inefficient today, and I'll tell you why it's inefficient and the opportunities that we have that your generation can provide in helping us resolve some of the biggest problems we have. We can generate nutrients. There's nitrogen and phosphorus locked up in that material, but it's today not cost effective for us to do it. We need new innovative technologies, and I'll challenge you and identify some of the opportunities there. We generate methane right now in most plants. So in the US, for example, only 10% of the plants that have digesters utilize the methane that they generate, and over 90% don't. So what can we do with that methane? There's some new innovations that I'll describe. What about CO2? What can we do with CO2? Today, it's a problem. As a humanity, we generate about 40 billion tons of CO2 that we put into the air. Over the last 200 years, we've put in over 2,000 tons of CO2. It's caused our planet to warm up. What can we do with that CO2? There's an incredible amount of opportunity. And then the 6th opportunity that I'll talk about is bringing new technologies, DNA genomics, and something called sewage epidemiology, where we begin treating sewage as a rich source of data that can help public health and help us understand disease and disease progression in the community. So very quickly, the first opportunity, how do we rupture this cell. So remember, this sludge in the past, we used to waste this material. In the new paradigm, the sludge that is wasted from a traditional plant contains a lot of energy, but that sludge is mostly bacterial cells. And these bacterial cells, so imagine that the blue inside is what we want to get to. That's where the organic material is. That's the food we want to get to. But you have this very strong cell outside. How do we open that cell up? Well, there are several methods we can use. Thermal hydrolysis, we can use shear, we can use chemicals, we can use many different things to try to stress the outside of that cell. I've worked with many of these technologies. I've also worked with bioaugmentation as well. But the key thing that I want you to take away is that we have not yet fully solved this problem. There are better things we can do. We need to make it cheaper. We need to make it more cost effective. And the goal is to make sure that we are able to very cost effectively rupture the cells so that we can reach into the organic content that they have and generate biogas, generate methane, generate CO2, and also capture and remove the nitrogen and phosphorus locked up within the cells. So that's the first opportunity. The second opportunity is the digesters that we use are terribly ineffective. The best example of anaerobic digestion takes place in the stomach of a cow. A cow is your perfect digester. It takes in grass, and it has how many compartments? It has 4 compartments. The 4 compartments in a cow's stomach actually mimic the 4 steps in anaerobic digestion. It might be a little difficult to see, but what happens in anaerobic digestion is your first step is you take these big chain molecules, you take cells, and you rip them apart and you cleave them. That's the first step. The second step is you take those molecules that you've now split up into small bits and you form fermentation products, you form propionate, you form things like butyrate. And then you convert those things in a third step to acetate. And then the step and some of the hydrogen present into methane. It's a 4-step process. Well, guess what? In a modern digest, means now each of these steps in biology in a cow stomach. So if you go into a cow stomach and you take microbes from each stage, the microbes are very different because each stage happens at a very different pH. It happens at a different set of conditions. But we don't do that in a modern digester. We mix everything together. And what it means is it is not optimum for any of the microbes in any of these 4 stages. The results is that the best digesters will only give you about 40% to 50% conversion of the organic material. So we need new things. In the future, our digesters must be multi-staged. The efficiency must be higher. The conversion, the volatile solid reduction, the conversion of organic material has to be higher. Today, these digesters are built to be 20 days or more. They need to be smaller and more compact. So this is an area that is remarkably important. This is where we generate renewable energy, and there's immense opportunity for you all, for you guys to make a difference in terms of how we run this process. The next one is nutrient recovery. There are many different types of solutions that we're working on, but the challenge again is they are not yet cost effective. So this is an example of one technology where we take the material from a digester, where we've split the cells, we've captured all the energy, we've released the nitrogen and the phosphorus, and in this reactor, we're forming something called struvite that combines nitrogen, phosphorus, and magnesium, and this is what the crystals look like. So these crystals are actually, this is fertilizer. It's a magnesium, nitrogen, phosphorus fertilizer. It can be done. I want to challenge all of you to think about is how do we reduce the cost? How do we reduce the complexity? How do we allow the capacity to scale this to systems that are as big as a system that might treat the waste of the whole of Delhi, or something like Dr. Hari was challenging us to do, which is maybe I do this treatment at the level of a house or a school. How do we scale it down cost effectively? That's a challenge that we've still not yet solved. The next one is, how do we find new ways of utilizing methane? So right now, anytime we have methane, the only thing we want to do is want to burn it. We want to convert it into energy. Well, sometimes we don't have the ability to convert it into energy. It might be it might be cost prohibitive. So one opportunity we have is there are processes called methanotropy, where we can actually take methane, and instead of burning methane to generate energy, we can actually react methane in the presence of oxygen and the presence of particular types of microbes to generate byproducts that can be utilized to generate biodiesel, to generate bioplastics, and to generate single-cell proteins that can replace animal proteins. And this is not theory. There are already companies that are doing this. So we have a company called Mango Materials that is generating PHAs and PHBs, bioplastics. They're using it to make materials, films. We have a company called Calista that is using methane in a chemical process and turning it into animal feed. And we have another company called Unibio that is making single-cell proteins using methane. So there are lots of opportunities, but we still have some challenges. And that's why there are only 3 companies I can share with you. And many of these companies have been trying for decades to make this process cost-effective. What's the problem? The yields are still low, the systems are complex, the selectivity is low, the cost is high. So there's a remarkable opportunity for future generations, your generation, to actually come up with solutions to make this accessible, available, and reliable. And then the next one is CO2. We generate humongous amounts of CO2 in the wastewater treatment process. The aerobic process generates about 80%, 60% CO2. The anaerobic process generates another significant amount of CO2. Well, what can CO2 help us do? We know that algae feed on CO2. Could we use more algae? Could we take that CO2 that we're generating, and instead of thinking about it as something that warms, that leads to global warming, could we actually feed that into algae bioreactors? And could those algae bioreactors help us generate more biomass, biofuels, fertilizer, nutraceuticals? Could we actually use the products from the anaerobic digestion to generate carbonization material that provides us with additional fuel sources? All of this is possible. It's been done, but the yields are low, the systems are complex, the cost is high. There's a remarkable opportunity to do more within this space. And then the final opportunity I'll talk about is in genomics and sewage epidemiology. It was during COVID that we really began leaning into this significantly. So think about it this way. If I want to know what's going on in a community, I just need to look in their wastewater, because their wastewater contains everything that they are doing in their homes. So during SARS, one of the ways in which SARS and COVID was being tracked in the US was by looking in the sewage system. If there was COVID, the virus would be in the wastewater, and the levels of the virus could tell you whether you were seeing pandemic conditions or whether you were starting to see a reduction. And right now, tracking something called sewage epidemiology, tracking materials in sewage, is being utilized to understand diseases like polio. We're using it to understand different things about disease progression in communities. And all we have to do is look in wastewaters. In fact, if you want to know it at a household or at a community level, you can go to pumping stations that come from different communities within a larger metropolis, and you can understand disease progression at a community level. What are the opportunities we have? Well, you could potentially use that same approach to understand drug use patterns. You can use it to do diversity studies. The DNA of any community is in their wastewater. So I can use it to understand what is happening with diversity within populations. If I look in the wastewater and I study what is in the wastewater, I can understand what people eat. I can understand nutrition. I can understand nutritional deficiencies and things like that. So the challenge for the future is, how do we extend this? How do we find new applications? So for example, in some communities, they're starting to use wastewater surveillance to actually understand drug use. I can determine whether people are using illicit drugs by just looking in the wastewater, because they will metabolize. The metabolites from that drug use will be in the water. And you can now have a situation where public safety officers know where to deploy resources just by looking in the wastewater and not by driving cars around in the street. And there are companies that are starting to provide those types of solutions. We need innovative business models. And then we need to also understand something called the fate and transport. So if somebody is using drugs, those drugs enter into the sewer system. Well, guess what? They're organic materials and they will begin to degrade. So by the time I measure it in the wastewater plant, there'll be some degradation. How do I understand? How do I look at the quantity of the material at one point and then tie it back to what the quantity should have been when it entered into the system initially? So fate and transport models, artificial intelligence and those types of issues. So this is a sixth area of immense opportunity. So this is the end of the discussion for me. And I want to finish on this point, that I really strongly believe that there's an unprecedented opportunity that we have to rethink how we conceive of water treatment. I don't believe we should be calling these things wastewater plants. I believe we should be calling them biorefineries. I believe we should be thinking about wastewater as a raw material, no different from many of the raw materials that we source to put into our factories. The wastewater plant is truly a factory. And it's a factory where we shouldn't think about it as a place where we only send material coming from households. But all types of waste, all types of organic material should be going to our sewage systems. And we should think about it as an energy and material factory that's providing us with electricity, us with bioplastics, providing us of circularity solutions that can allow us to be sustainable and also to be either carbon positive or at a minimum carbon neutral. So thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts and ideas with you.
Thanks, Malcolm. As usual, very precise and focused. Well, I must acknowledge the presence of people from the WOW Action Forum. Quite a few of you have joined. Thank you. I think nearly a third of the total, now we are close to 70 people here, are from the Action Forum. Now, Pallavi Gupta has raised a hand. What I'll do is I will possibly, one of you, Yatin, can you help me? Maybe you can give her, speaking rights or whatever it's called.
Right.
Yes, please. Let's allow her to speak. There is one more person also after. And any of you from the WOW group who are all very genuine and good solution providers or solution seekers, maybe you want to speak, you can raise hands and we will elevate you to panelist. Yes, Pallavi Gupta. Where is she? I can't see. Yeah, there she is. Pallavi Gupta.
Yeah, she is the part of panelist group, right?
Oh, is she now? Pallavi, go on. If you're here, you must speak. Pallavi Gupta, are you speaking? Okay, I am going to. Bhaskar, you have been promoted. You could speak too if you want to. Right? I don't know how it works. Yatin, you have to help me. I have done that.
Are they not able to?
They are not able to unmute.
Yeah,
they're not
Bhaskar.
able to speak.
Yeah, I've been able to join now. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead, please. For the rest of you, Bhaskar is a chartered accountant, but for the last 10 years or so has been working on something called diatoms and lakes and water purification. He's based in Hyderabad. Over to you, Bhaskar.
Good afternoon, Dr. Malcolm. Good morning. I'm promoting using diatom algae to treat sewage. We have a process to grow diatoms very in a simple manner. You have mentioned algae, but you're not specified which type of algae and how they can be grown. Have you ever worked on diatoms, sir?
No, I haven't worked specifically with diatoms, but I have supported solutions providers that work with a variety of algae, including diatoms, mostly providing the CO2 and the nutrients that they utilize. But I have not worked personally with diatoms.
But our process is that you grow atoms directly in the
That's
area
okay.
tank.
Now, on
Nitrogen-
diatoms, do you have a specific take, Malcolm? Specific take on
You know,
Yes. Go ahead, Malcolm.
yeah, so my philosophy is that types of algae. The key challenge that we have oftentimes with algae is two things. So one is the challenge of being able to narrow down the species diversity of the algae that we deal with. So there's a lot of wild, especially because of the way the treatment happens out in the open.
Right.
And then the second one is the very low efficiency of the conversion of the light that you're providing if you were doing this artificially, right? So if you were doing this naturally, you need extensive amounts of light. If you're doing this artificially,
Perfect.
then you're providing light sources, but those light sources attenuate very quickly. It's a significant challenge. But what we're trying to do is we're promoting the use of a broad range of algae, things like kelp, macroalgae that are immensely large,
Right.
that are typically mostly limited to maybe marine type environments. But
quick interruption. Stop the share so that we can look at the rest of them. Yeah.
okay, sure. Let me do that.
Yeah, that's it. Go on, please.
Okay, super.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think if you've come up with a way of very cost effectively and simply generating these algae, growing them, that's remarkable, and I think it solves one of the big issues that many people are grappling with
Okay.
in the use of algae. Yes.
Fair enough. So you're saying this is one of many solutions, and if it's done in a natural, whatever nature-based way, it's good enough. As long as the intervention.
Absolutely.
Got it. So it's one of the solutions among many as far as lakes and water bodies go. Is that what I understand from you, Malcolm?
That's right.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
Aditi Sonjake, would you want to speak up, please? Aditi, you have to unmute and speak. Aditi, okay, she's not. Sureshji, I think you should speak. You are one of the senior most in India today who has been driving such things, and out of deference to what you do. And you are being the chairman of the National Building Code, which is coming up with the revised code in 2025. And you and I know that I've been urging you to see what changes we can make in part 3 of the code. I'd like you to speak. Essentially, today, what we heard from Malcolm is that those outmoded practices of the past, SBR, NBR, MBBR, and all of that has got to just stop, number one. Second, he's saying, I think I heard him say this, that sludge should not move out of buildings in a way that it's part of the mass transporting of sewage.
Use it again.
Yeah, no, you can hold it back and treat it there, but if you send sewage out as part of the long distance transport of sewage, it causes more harm to the city as to every city, as Dr. Raval has also been saying. Uncannily, there are two people here, Malcolm and Ravalji, who are resonating on those views. Over to you, Sureshji.
Yeah, Dr. Malcolm, that was a very fabulous presentation. I liked the new directions over the years from the 50s, 60s, 70s to 90s, and even the 2000, the new concerns and the new imperatives that has made the treatment processes different, as rightly told by Chandra, from the MBR and MBBR and the activated sludge process. We are coming a long way in the process involved in that. I wanted to ask two questions, especially at city level. Would you think these laws should be all done by the city corporation or municipality or the council people, or done by the communities at decentralized level? That is my first question, of certain critical mass to make it work. And also the type of capital cost and operating cost. At the end of the day, all these things will work provided you're able to maintain it well. In India's biggest problem is the STPs are not functioning well because we are not you spend a lot of time in creating it, but to keep it running 24/7 is a very major one where the operating costs will also come in terms of chemical, in terms of energy, in terms of people to work on that. So these two areas, if you are able to indicate at what level is it done at the end of the city level or decentralized unit, can be done by both private
over
sector
to you,
people
Malcolm.
or only by the government,
Yeah.
local bodies. And
Malcolm,
second
if you
one is
want to,
the
you can skip this, question on cap cost and operating cost, because we
No,
are
I'm happy to. I'm actually happy to take it, and thank you so much, Dr. Suresh, for that question. So the first one, around centralization versus decentralization. My sense is that one of the biggest challenges, one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of sewage and water treatment. If you look around the world, there's only about 30 to 40% of communities that actually have centralized treatment. And the problem is we're waiting for this big, massive solution. And the cost is so high that it paralyzes us into inaction. When the truth is that we can actually solve this problem at a household or communal level. One of the things, but to your point, there are also some of these technologies that are not scaling well. So you would realize that as I was talking, there were areas where I was saying the problem we have here is still scale. So I think if we really want to deploy these solutions, we want to deploy them quickly, we have to think about decentralization as a solution at a communal level. And part of the reason is also because we spend a lot of our effort just pumping waste to a central place.
Yes.
So, and that's where we consume a lot of energy. So there's a significant amount of energy losses. I know there are people starting to think about, okay, how can we capture some of the energy from that moving sewage flow? We don't always have the benefits of having gravity to drive the flow. So oftentimes, as I was saying before, 2 to 4% of the total energy consumed in most communities that do water and wastewater treatment is just spent in pumping. That's a humongous amount of energy. So decentralization has to be part of how we think of the future. Then in terms of maintenance and cost, if we think about, so the reality is the sewage plant should not be a cost center. If we were generating energy from there, if we were so that's starting to happen, for example, in the US, you're having people go to wastewater plants and say, look, you have a digester. I can optimize that digester. I want to take it away from you. I want to operate it. I will pay you to use it, but you will allow me to go bring food waste. You will allow me to go bring manure. You will allow me to go bring other things that would normally not come to a wastewater plant, and I will generate 10 times the energy that you would typically be able to generate. I would take that energy and I would put it in pipelines and I would make money from it. So how can we think about those types of paradigm shifts, new types of business models that allow us to make enough money so that the maintenance is now not a burden. We're now maintaining a production facility, right? So if we're maintaining a production facility, it just becomes part of the cost that we use to generate revenue. If we're thinking of it as maintenance of a public service where the only thing is cost and we make nothing from it, then we're at the mercy of whoever determines the budget that goes. And sometimes, so that's the problem. So I think if we think about it as how do we make this a revenue generating center? How does it become a biorefinery? And how can we make sure that we're utilizing all of this organic material and this energy to generate funds and value that is viable?
One spill-off question with permission of Hari. What about the reuse of water, reuse of water for various purposes? You talked of energy as a major component coming. I liked it very much. It'll sell well. On recycling, reuse of water for various purposes?
Absolutely, it's crucial. So I laugh sometimes when so if you think about it, when we use water, less than about 5 to 10% of the water is used for drinking. We use most of it to flush. We use a lot of it to water our plants. Why do we have to treat that to the highest levels?
Whatever level. So you can
That's
decide
right.
that.
So my point is, Dr. Suresh, that recycling and reuse should be part of how we think.
Okay,
And
right.
the level of treatment should depend on what we want to use it for.
Yes,
So if
the
50% of
BOD
it should
level.
go to flushing, exactly.
Yeah.
So treat it only to the level of what you want to use it for, but we have to think about reuse in every case, because we're wasting
Okay.
water by
Got it.
not reusing it significantly. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for
Very
all the
precise.
response. Three.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Questions. Lovely questions, Sureshji. Ganesh Shanbhag, very quickly, your take. And then we will move to Aditi. Yes.
Yeah, hello, Dr. Malcolm. So it was really a good presentation. Actually, I wanted to ask about the same thing what Sureshji asked first about that centralization versus decentralization. So if we talk about India as a Indian perspective, right? So all our cities have already been on long distance, centralized, mismanaged sewage systems, right? So we should also think about some kind of a efficacy and efficiency in any retrofit solutions that can be provided in these cities. So if you can add it as a key challenge in those 6 challenges what you mentioned, a retrofit solution, that would be really good for the technology providers to come and give new kind of a solutions for these mismanaged cities. Otherwise a wonderful, thanks for the insights.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. So we're starting to see that. And in my response to Dr. Suresh, one of the things that I mentioned was we're starting to see commercial people go to wastewater plants and say, let me run your digester. You already have a digester. Can I take that part and can I turn it into a profit-making center? And I'll pay you. I'll pay you for using it. So to your point, when we were relying on the cities, it was line waste. We're always paying to do it. It was ineffective, ineffectual, but we're starting to see people think about new and different types of business models. So one of the problems, so you're absolutely right. We should think about that. The assets are there. A lot of times they are wasting. How can we think about, sometimes the solution is actually not a technology solution. Sometimes the solution is a new business solution, an innovative solution that leverages existing technology and causes us to rethink how we imagine the management and operations of these facilities. That's a great point of view.
Just want to add another stuff, like if we consider a city, Kolkata in India, right? So most of the sewage is managed by natural wetlands, which are in the outskirts of the.
It's in the past tense now. Yeah.
Oh, it's destroyed? I'm sorry, I wasn't aware. Yeah, so if we can introduce those kind of legacy systems or historically what has been proven right into these kind of a solution. I'm not saying new technology should not come, but yeah, it's a good mix of older wisdom and a newer technology can definitely solve the larger mess what we have created.
Malcolm, his question is to do with, what we had as natural wetlands in that city called Kolkata, which is about 20 million, about the same population as Lagos. And
if I'm not wrong, it's Chandrabhan Nagar or something like that.
yeah, it's southwest of Kolkata. But, what he's actually asking you, Malcolm, is about the possibility of constructed wetlands being part of such localized wastewater treatment systems.
Exactly, yes.
Oh, absolutely. So we actually have, interestingly, places in the US, for example, where constructed wetlands are part of the solution. And part of the challenge you have in many of the cities is that we don't have such. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of those spaces available. But wherever they are wherever we can use nature to do what we can use construction to do. I would go with nature 100 times out of 100. So constructed wetlands, leveraging nature, leveraging natural landscapes and those types of issues, natural wetlands, that has to be part of the solution. And in places like Texas, in places like Florida, where we have a lot of those opportunities, they utilize that significantly in how they think about handling water and wastewater treatment, and very effectively too.
Yeah, the challenge is, for instance, Ganesh, who's here, he lives in an apartment which has barely any place. For him to do a constructed wetlands is out of the question. So like you said earlier, we need to look at the level of treatment that we need depending on what we want to use it for. And sometimes we
Right.
have this obsession with doing something because it is sustainable. And I keep telling people that's not what you need to do. You need to do what is necessary and only what is resource efficient. It's not about sustainability at all. You and I know this. A lot of us here know it, Malcolm. But someday we get fixed with labels. You want to talk about that, Malcolm?
Sure. So, in fact, Dr. Harry, I would actually contend that sustainability means we should only do what is necessary. That is what is sustainable. So I should only treat, if all I need to do is treat it to a level that allows me to discharge, to use this stuff to water my garden, or treat it to a level that allows me to use it to continue flushing my toilets. That's what sustainability demands we do, because anything beyond that means we're using more energy, we're treating beyond the necessity that is required. That has to be the paradigm with which we think.
Absolutely. Aditi Sontake, sorry, I had to wait
Yeah.
for the others to finish. Go on, please.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Excellent presentation, Dr. Malcolm, and thanks for the opportunity for this webinar. I am architect Aditi Sontake, working as Associate Professor at Thakur School of Architecture and Planning. Sir, my question is regarding the industrial effluent. How about industrial effluent can be treated, and what is the way forward for it?
So industrial effluents are really interesting. So one of the things I've seen over the last, two decades and a half of working in this space is that more and more. So I'll talk about my experiences in the US and in South America, where I've done, as well as in China, where I've done a lot of work in this space. About 20 years ago, most industries wanted to be discharging to the local sewage facility because for them it was cheaper. What I'm seeing now is many industrial facilities actually choosing to do their own sewage, to do their own treatment for several reasons. One little part of it is regulatory, but the bigger part of it is that many of them are starting to catch on to this whole thinking around how can I can get more out of my water than I typically would. Some of them are doing it because they want to reduce their water footprint. Some of them are doing it because they're in water-starved areas. Some of them are doing it because they have sustainability goals. But I'm seeing more and more facilities do it because it allows them, it's very concentrated waste, it's dense, it's energy dense. And one of the things I'm seeing are some innovative business models where companies, some of the larger companies, and even some of the smaller ones, are going in, offering a service to the industrial facility and saying, look, can we give you a localized, decentralized water treatment system? But by the way, I also want to be able to bring in some materials and do the treatment of those materials within your facility. So things like, bringing in manure and doing anaerobic digestion, generating energy, and those types of things. So industrial waste have, they are typically a big challenge when you think about communal wastewater treatment. But as I said, they offer a great opportunity for decentralization because they're very separate, they're very concentrated, usually small volumes, but with incredible amounts of organic material. So they normally provide you with the first opportunities for thinking about decentralization. And as I said, now we're seeing a lot more opportunity when you think about it from a decentralized perspective for you to actually generate value that can bring revenue both to the facilities themselves and to the people who come in to do the treatment.
Yeah, one quick supplementary question to what she asked, what Aditi was asking, Malcolm. What have you seen to be the investment recovery period, the payback period for an effluent treatment plant as against a sewage treatment plant?
An effluent treatment plant,
as a ratio, would you say 6 to 7 years? Because in sewage treatment, if it is biological contamination, I know that we can recover it in 2.5 to 3 years, given even the current water tariffs, which are very low. This is pertinent to Sureshji's question.
Yes. So if we think about the costs on a per cubic meter basis,
Correct.
there is typically a lot more that goes into industrial effluent treatment.
Absolutely.
The strength of the waste tends to be higher. The complexity of the material. So if I look at municipal sewage, for example, the waste is mostly carbohydrates, proteins,
Correct.
and fats and oils from the food we eat.
Yeah.
If I look at the effluent plants, we
Toxic,
can be talking
Oh, we have
about
chromium. We have
textile.
the
It can be
chemicals of-
toxic.
Ar-
Textiles,
arsenic and
pharmaceuticals.
We have heavy metals.
Yeah, so it's way more complex, has metals.
So
you
what is
have
your
metal
ratio? Is it
removal,
1:3,
metal recovery.
Malcolm? Is it 1:3, 1:4?
It's probably more like 1:5.
Exactly,
It's probably
exactly.
1:5 and more.
Right.
Yes.
I think 1:5 should be there.
So
Yes,
you
it's-
see, Malcolm, therefore, to go back to Aditi Sontake's question, I find, at least among those things that I'm mentoring, that if I were to, address this ETP issue with heavy metals also in water, I find that it takes 7 to 7.5 years for payback, and most industrialists do not want, therefore, to take it. There is no, it's not like, the way you described it, that people want to see what wealth can be extracted from that wastewater. But if I were to take, let us say, a residential or a commercial building or some such thing which has only biological contamination, what is interesting is we are able to recover it even at, the kind of low water tariffs that we have in India in about 30 months max. We are doing, for example, today, if I were to take a 300,000 liter per day or a 300 KLD kind of a system, typically of the kind that they will have in this college, in Shruti Jain's college, I would say that they can recover their money in less than 24 months to 30 months. But they will not do it. It's not for want of solutions. The solutions exist, but their managements will say no to it. They will continue to preach all this among the students, and I'm being provocative just now, Shruti, but they will not walk the talk. Shruti Jain, I want you to speak on that. If you have I'll make the question more specific for you. If you have 1,000 students at 20 LPCD, you've got 20,000 liters. Approximately, therefore, you have got about 8 to 9 million liters in a year. Even if I have to take 250 academic days, 5 million liters, let us say, of wastewater, and you are not doing anything about it. Over to you.
So basically, first of all, I would like to, apprise you that there is a lot of, we are a sustainable institution, and we are absolutely, reusing all the wastewater, rainwater, everything is being reused. So we are working a lot on all the sustainable development goals. Apart from that, in the biotechnology department, we have a complete department who's only working with the water management, and a lot of research going on with water as well as water waste. And we have since, almost more than 15 years. In fact, we have been working on restoration of the Bhatkal Lake, that's a part of Faridabad. It's quite near to the university.
We lost you there. Okay. We lost you, Shruti Jain. Yes.
Sir, may I?
Yes,
May I
yes, yes,
intervene?
yes,
Yes.
please. Yes.
So,
Bhatkal Lake. She was talking about Bhatkal Lake.
regarding the industrial effluent, I think it should be it can be worked out perfectly as a circular economy in case of water recovery as well as the residuals. Whatever residuals recovered from the treatment process.
Yes.
So
yes.
that
I have
should
no
be
doubts that it can be recovered. The question is, for 100,000 liters of biologically contaminated water of the kind that Dr. Malcolm was speaking about, I spend about, let us say, 40 lakhs, 4 million rupees. But if the same thing has to have, has heavy metals of the kind you spoke about, Santake, the cost is about 1.8 crores. 180
The processes are different.
The process, it's more of the same. There's a lot more intense things, and experts like Dr. Malcolm understand that well.
Yeah,
Over to you, Malcolm.
So a portion of
Yes,
sorry, sorry.
Yes, please.
Yes,
Please.
sir, that monetary cost is that important than ecological costs?
You talk to a businessman and convince him and come back to me. I will give you the solution. Okay?
Sorry, I think I got
Yeah.
disconnected
Yeah.
due to
Yes.
some issue.
Yes. Yes. Yes, Shruti. Just one moment. I think Dr. Malcolm wanted to say something. Yes, please.
No, I was just going to say that to your point, about 70-80% of the processes are the same, but then when you start having things like, metals, heavy metals and things like that, then we start needing to do things like, ion resin beds, precipitation, adding chemicals. So we add processes that then raise the cost. But Dr. Hari, I also wanted to to just contribute to the question you were asking from Professor earlier about what they're doing in their school. Is one of the challenges that I find we have. You're right that the technology exists, and in many cases that technology is actually it's cost effective, returns are there. What I'm finding is that the area where I've seen the most change, that is making the most impact, is with business models and not even technology. So, for example, when you mentioned that it might be possible within 2-3 years or even 4 years for you to see a positive return, one of the things I'm starting to see, and I had to do this in my own business, was that you would go to people and you would tell them, oh, we have this technology, it can help reduce your cost, your payback time is going to be quick. And they would never, it would just take them, for them, it was really not a priority. So what I've seen done, and what I've done in some of the businesses I've been involved with, is to start thinking about maybe innovative business models where, even though all we wanted to do initially was design and provide a technology solution, we found ourselves needing to get into operations where we would say, okay, you don't want to spend the money. Maybe you're not convinced, or maybe it's not a priority, but we think we can make money from doing this. So why don't we provide you with this solution as a service rather than as a sale? And I think it mimics a lot of what we're seeing on the software side, where many companies are providing software as a service. And so as a service,
this is called
yes,
pay as you save, PAYS.
That's right. But the challenge then is, now you are a technology provider, you are now being forced to start thinking about capital markets and interest rates and borrowings and things like that. So that's the challenge.
Absolutely. So Aditi, the question is, I agree with you entirely, Aditi Suntake, that we cannot put a why to this question. In fact, you saw me, sort of stopping Sureshji also and saying, why are we going into the economics of it? We cannot negotiate these elements if we are leaders of business or we are abusers. We are massive water consumers, water users, or energy users. We need to do it. No question of cost, but it doesn't happen like that. And that's part of the conundrum that we are all trying to solve. Apurva Shah, we have only another 6 to 7 minutes before we close. And I invite the faculty to speak again. Apurva, quickly, your comments, please.
Yeah, Malcolm, very nice presentation. And my question to you is, can you highlight the role of atmospheric air in organic degradation? And then there are two small another questions once this is finished.
Yes, so the key role, so the role of atmospheric air in organic degradation. Was that the question?
Yeah, okay. That's what the question.
Okay, so so the way, so I think a key part of probably 80-90% of the treatment processes that we use in sewage is actually based on the aerobic process.
The aerobic process.
Where we're taking, yes. And I honestly think, I believe that we need to rethink that paradigm, because there is a significant amount of anaerobic degradation does not need, in order to use air, I need compressors.
Short
I need
answer is no.
And I would rather not do that.
Professor Shruti Jain, you are listening to this. Professor Shruti Jain, if you check out in your college, sorry Apurva, if you check out in your college as to what you have as a wastewater treatment system, and if it has got some aeration-based system of this kind, you are not meeting any sustainable development goal. Over to you, Apurva, again.
Yeah.
Yes.
The second question is, you must have heard about urine diverting commode, and if we separate urine and excreta at the source.
Yeah, it's possible, but we leave that because cities will not do it. You and I will not do it. So that becomes an academic question.
There are UDT available, and worldwide it is also simple.
Yeah, we will do it for the poor. There are some other human subspecies, you see. We will not do it ourselves. So I think we should not. We should
then the last question is,
yes, please.
If excreta with less water is mixed with soil, the performance of the treatment, which was the 19th century entire rural world, or the other than the cities where the industrial development was not there, the treatment was functioning absolutely well. Nutrient recovery was also happening. Why are we not thinking like that? If excreta is mixed with soil, the treatment happens.
Good question.
Other than human Homo sapiens, all other animals are excreting in the soil only, and the treatment is happening, or there is no infection or any
Malcolm,
problem
your
happens.
thoughts. Yeah, he's
so that's true. I think the challenge that we have is that we live in cities with humongous populations.
Yeah, you don't have the soil available.
And because of those humongous populations, we don't have that land available.
Correct.
And that's the problem we have. Otherwise, that would be a perfect solution. But it's the cities, it's the sizes of the cities, it's the quantity of the waste. And in addition to that, it's also the fact that we have started using a lot more water that is making the waste way more dilute. And therefore the volumes we have to, but you're right, there used to be a time when that was a solution and it was an effective solution.
Even one small addition I can make, as of now, even in cities, all Jain monks, they don't use water or pipeline, and they just add charcoal. Yeah, with the excreta, and the treatment happens at all Jain Upashra and everywhere. And this tradition they are following since 2,500 years.
Wow, interesting. Udayan from Nagpur, anything from you quickly? We have really run out of time.
Thank you.
Yes. Udayan Shruti, you can unmute and speak. Yeah, quickly if you can, because we are already at 16 past.
Good morning to Dr. Malcolm, and good afternoon to everybody. I liked your statement of sewage as a liability. I call it NIMBY syndrome, not in my backyard. And that's what is the reality. One comment I would like to make on the industrial effluent treatment. See, what is happening is that, say, for example, I'll take an example of a textile mill. A composite textile mill has a discharge from dyeing section, finishing section, the sizing section, the boiler blowdowns, the cooling tower blowdowns. These are broadly the parameters. What is happening is that all this is mixed and taken to an effluent treatment plant. And then as the treatment progresses, the energy intensity keeps on increasing. And that's where it becomes unsustainable. Rather than looking at end of pipe solutions, if we focus our energy on the starting of the pipeline, let's say we have done some experiments on the dyeing effluent where we find that dyes can be recovered and those dyes can be used for painting industry. So it becomes an economy. And that way, rather than focusing on the solvent, if we focus on the solute, it would make more sense. And I think even the digester way or the energy way which you are propagating is more of a solute recovery than the solvent. And the philosophy right now is recovery of solvent. I think it's high time we shift to solute recovery. And I think we have a goal or a way forward on which we should proceed. That's what is my take on today's,
Very sharp. Very
seminar.
sharp. It's a
Thank you
great.
so much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
Over to
Yeah.
you, Rachna, or I would say Professor Shruti Jain first. Let's close with 1 minute from you and possibly another 30 seconds from Rachna. Yes.
Sir,
The context is, what is the takeaway for your
okay,
students?
so
And look at the
though
number of
I'm not a water
students. One moment.
biologist,
Look at the number
sir,
of students who
yes.
have dropped out after the presentation was made. Why are they going away after the present? They're not thinking through the interactions. Over to you. Over to you.
Sir, as a mentor, I particularly feel that awareness and education in students is very important. Once we tell about sustainability goals, at some point of time in life, they will realize that it is very important, and conservation of water and all the resources, actually, all the resources are degrading. So, at one point of time in life, somewhere it will hit them, and that is very important. And as we are in Manav Rachna, and we have been working on the sustainability goal also, and we have been working on restoration of Bhatkal Lake, and that is very important. So my take is basically educate the students at the starting level and make them aware. So awareness is very important.
Okay.
But
Absolutely
Rachna,
agree
if
with
that
Rachna.
moment is not now, when is it going to be? The world is, I mean, the climate crisis is today. If they are not seeing it now, and it's happening all around us, I'm sure it's the same everywhere, in your campus, everywhere. So worldwide. So, I mean, I think the urgency of it has to be more, really has to be more present. They have to be more present to the urgency of it. It cannot be when and if and then they eventually come around. Who
They
knows?
will not
There won't be a
realize it.
planet for them to come around.
It should be
Humans will
now.
realize it
It should
when
be
they have a
now.
disaster around them. If it
Yeah.
hurts you, you will act. That is the
Correct.
sad truth of
Absolutely,
all humans.
absolutely.
Shruti
Sorry,
Jain,
Shruti, you
the
were going to
last
say.
30 seconds, yes.
Absolutely, I
Look
agree
at,
with
look at
what
even in
you
Olympics,
know,
they couldn't use a
Professor.
river sign for various activities because the
I got it.
quality of the water with the BOD level was becoming so
True.
high
Yes.
on that. It's
Yeah. Do
you
you
could
want to
see
have a
that they could
last
not.
word? Yes. Do you want to have a
Yeah,
last
sorry,
word,
yeah,
Shruti Jain?
yeah.
Yes. You have to unmute, please. You have to unmute if
Right.
you want
So
to
I
speak.
was just yes, I was just talking about that I agree with Rachna about the same, and definitely, though I'm not a water waste microbiologist, but a designer, and definitely, we are the one of the stakeholders who inculcate the same as academicians also into the students, so they take this forward, again, so they are also the lamp light holders. So, but on the other note, the session was amazing, and this was, the next level for wastewater to be used as biofuel, and that's
Got
the
that.
future. Amazingly, working towards how
Yeah.
to manage
Yeah.
the same, and towards
Yeah.
the best of
Sure.
the sustainable goals.
Sure. I only
That's
wish
wonderful.
that, these things don't remain some hollow phrases and sentences, that you all act upon it in your own life and public buildings. If you are in a college, it's a great opportunity to do things on energy, water, or waste. And if you are not going to do it, you forfeit the right to be speaking or participating in things that are to do with sustainability. I'm making strong statements today, and I believe that these are necessary for us. As somebody said, I think it was Aditi Santake who said, we cannot negotiate sustainability even at the,
I
even if it's
agree.
very expensive on cost. I must acknowledge the
Completely agree.
presence of Vijay Sai Meka, who is an IGBC leader from Andhra. We have, of course, Dr. Upendra Raval, who has decided to keep quiet today. And a lot of his other, people have been speaking today. I see Shakti Bhatt here. I see Gopal Krishna Bhatt, who has been working on some of these concerns for the last 35, 40 years. I see Devashish Mukherjee. I see Gopal Santana. Gopalji has been a wonderful participant in many other things that are related to water, Malcolm. So today, Malcolm, you had a very, very discerning set of ears. We were about 70 odd people at one point in time. And that's one of the challenges that teachers have to address among students. They have this typeset. I have to listen to your presentation. After that, if there are people talking, they are wasting my time and they go away. It's a mindset, Malcolm. And I'm sure as a teacher, you yourself experienced that. And people like architect Rachna, Professor Shruti Jain, and others have to necessarily address this among students. This forum, this platform has been created primarily to see that we address the needs of students, excite them into looking at these futures of water, of energy, of the planet, and of their own selves. It makes greater sense today to take a job or create a career, build a career in these areas than to take an IT job in one of those companies. I can tell you that. I can assure you that. Payal, any last words and we close? 4:23, very, very late.
Just thank you to everybody. Thank you, Dr. Malcolm. Very, very enriching. I was fascinated when you said that from the sewage water, you can actually assess what goes on in the families which live there, or the usage of, whether there's drugs in it or diseases or whatever. I mean, that's fascinating to me. I wish, and what Dr. Malcolm said, that that they offered this service as a service provider. Are there people like that here? Please share information with us. Anybody who's out there, I'm sure there are plenty of takers who need these problems solved. I know there's zillions in Delhi, for one, but it was a very, very enriching conversation. Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, Rachna ji. Thank you, Suresh ji. Thank you very much. Lovely having you.
Thank you,
Doctor, as always,
Bhaskar and
most
Apurva
articulate.
and
Thank you to everybody.
Udyan Shravti, all of you. Bhaskar, Apurva and Udyan Shravti, thank you for being here. You're all
Malcolm, we should
wonderful
especially
professionals.
thank Malcolm. Early morning,
Of
getting
course.
up early morning.
No,
It's
Early
still
morning, yes.
such
It's a
early hours
pleasure.
for him to spend time with us. It must
There
be
is a
still
yes.
early hours there in East Coast.
I've been yeah
Yes,
now
it's going to be 7 soon. So it's
7 now.
no,
Right.
it's fine. It was a pleasure to participate.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much, Malcolm, once again.
Thank
And
you so
we
much.
will continue our conversation. We need to crack some solutions that can work on the marketplace, of course. Thanks once again to all of you. Yeah.
Super. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great.